Hello my dear students in our new episode of biology program for the third secondary grade. اهلا بكم ابنائنا وبناتنا طلاب الثانويه العامه في حلقه جديده لماده البيولوجي. اسمحوا لي في بدايه الحلقه هنرحب بالاستاذ يحيى سالم دي expert of biology in the Ministry of Education. اهلا بك مستر يحيى.
اهلا وسهلا مستر شريف.
نورتنا حضرتك.
اهلا وسهلا.
الحقيقه احنا الحلقه دي عملناها يعني as a revision on chapter 1 and chapter 2. فالحلقه كلها هتبقى اسئله واجابات. حضرتك حاول معاك ورقه وقلم، السؤال اللي تعرفه عديه خلاص، ده انت تعرفه. اللي انت ما تعرفوش اكتب السؤال واكتب الانسر بتاعته. لو الانسر بتاعته لقيتها فيها كلام التليفون واتصل بينا واسالنا في اللي انت عايز تسال فيه. اوكي، هنبدا كده. اول سؤال مع بعضنا. اول سؤال عندنا بيقول لي choose the correct answer، وبعدين بيقول لي plant cell becomes turgid if the water pass through it by means of dots. لما يتكلم عن الترجيد or the plant turgidity، هنا بيقول لك imbibition، root pressure، osmosis. root pressure تاني مستر يحيى، ايه الانسر اللي حضرتك هتقولها؟
It's osmosis, Mr.
Osmosis of course. طبعا osmosis is the passage of water molecules from high concentrated medium of water to low concentrated medium of water through the semi-permeable membrane. That due to the presence of the osmotic pressure. The osmotic pressure is formed as a result of the difference of concentration at the two sides of the plasma membrane. So the water get inside the cell vacuole by osmosis, and that leads to its turgidity. هنشوف السؤال اللي بعد كده. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لنا برضه choose the correct answer. Walls of the plant cell become stronger due to deposition of dots. عندنا كيوتين، سيوبرين، cellulose and lignin. طبعا الانسر يا مستر يحيى.
The right answer is cellulose and lignin.
Of course. طبعا cellulose that precipitated on the wall of the cell to become more stronger, and also the lignin increase the thickness or deposit inside the cell on the cell wall, so the cell wall become lignified cellulose that give the plant its support and also its flexibility. يبقى هنا الرايت انسر عندنا cellulose and lignin. السؤال اللي بعد كده نمبر 3 بيقول the thoracic cage is formed of ribs bones only ولا and dorsal vertebra only ولا and sternum only ولا and sternum with the dorsal vertebra.
The right answer is the sternum and the dorsal vertebra.
Of course, because the thoracic cage is formed of 12 thoracic vertebra, 12 pairs of ribs and sternum. But the upper 10 pairs of ribs are connected with the sternum bone, but the two lower ribs are short ribs, can't reach the sternum bone, but all of them, the 12 pairs of ribs, are connected as the dorsal side with the transverse process and the centrum of the thoracic vertebra. شوف السؤال اللي بعده. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لنا برضو choose the correct answer. The neural canal is found in the dots. متهيألي السؤال ده مش محتاج ان انا اقول لي choice، ده سؤال سهل. يبقى النيورال كانال مستر يحيى.
It is found inside the vertebra because it is responsible for the protection of the spinal cord itself.
Yes, the neural canal allows the passage of the spinal cord through the vertebral column. يبقى هنا على طول هنقول ذا vertebra. السؤال اللي بعد كده قدامنا برضو choose the correct answer. بيقول لنا the total number of vertebra in the human vertebral column is dots. برضو مش هقول choice، الناس حافظاها مستر يحيى، هتبقى 33 vertebra. خد بالك السؤال هنا بيقول لك the number of vertebra، لكن لو قال لي the number of bones يبقى انا هنا مش هقول له 33، هستبعد الفرتبرا او الفيوزد فيرتبرا، وبعدين نبدا هناخد بالنا ان الساكرال فيرتبرا فيوز والكوكسيجيال فيرتبرا فيوز، لما نعدهم هنلاقيهم 26 بونز. لكن لما اقول نمبر اوف فيرتبرا يبقى 33 فيرتبرا، واخد بالي من هو عايز النمبر اوف بونز ولا النمبر اوف فيرتبرا. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لي the distance between two dark Z lines is called muscle fiber, muscle bundle, sarcomere, muscle fibril or myofibril. هنقول له ايه مستر يحيى؟
The right answer is sarcomere, mister.
Of course, sarcomere is the distance between two successive Z lines. كل sarcomere هيبقى فيها two halves of light bands and one dark band. So it acts as a unit of the myofibril. نشوف السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا compounds produced by analysis of the acetylcholine are dots. Choline and carbon dioxide, choline and acetic acid, choline and lactic acid, acetic acid and carbon dioxide. هنقول له مستر يحيى.
The right answer is B, because whenever acetylcholine is decomposed, it produces two different things, which is acetate or acetic acid and choline substance.
Of course, that due to the action of the cholinesterase enzyme, which causes the hydrolysis or complete hydrolysis of acetylcholine after performing its function. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لنا the number of human cervical vertebra is dots vertebra. برضو في أسئلة أنا ما يعني أبص على التشويس بس، لكن مش محتاجها، بتبقى الإجابة سهلة قوي. السيرفيكال vertebra مستر يحيى
7 vertebrae.
7 vertebra. كنا قلنا إنه دول located as the neck region and they are moderate in size. طيب نشوف اللي بعدها. The two floating ribs of the thoracic cage are the dots. The 9th and 8th and the 9th, the 9th and 10th, the 10th and 11th, the 11th and the 12th.
11th and the 12th, mister.
Yes, Mr. Yahya, why they are called the floating ribs?
Because really they are not connected to the sternum, so they are called the floating ribs because they don't have the end which is connected to the sternum, mister.
Yes, and they are short ribs, can't reach the sternum bone. All the following hormones. طبعا احنا بدينا في شابتر 2 كده في الجزء بتاع ال MCQ question. All the following hormones affect the liver except dots. Insulin, adrenaline, glucagon, parathormone. هنجاوب نقول ايه الانسر يا مستر يحيى؟
Parathermal, mister.
Yes, because the adrenaline hormone, which is secreted at the critical situation that stimulates the liver to change the glycogen into glucose to increase the glucose level in blood to face the changes or the critical situation. And also the insulin stimulates the hepatic cells to change the excess amount of glucose into glycogen that's stored inside the liver. The glucagon, which is called the fasting hormone, that stimulate the liver to change the stored glycogen inside the liver into glucose to increase the glucose level in blood. يبقى الانسولين والجلوكاجون دول كانوا antagonize each other. الادرينالين هرمون ده secreted during the critical situation at the fighting and the other critical situation. الكويشن اللي بعده بيقول لنا برضو خلينا في الهرمونز، والهرمونز شابتر لذيذ محدش بيغلط فيه. السؤال اللي بعد كده حصل طبعا حاجة في اللابتوب بنعتذر عنها، لكن هنرجع تاني للأسئلة بتاعتنا مرة تانية. السؤال عندنا بيقول لك the development of the mammary glands, milk secretion and release are regulated by all the following hormones except. في التشويس اللي عندنا ستيروجين، برولاكتين، the progesterone and oxytocin hormone. اخد بالي من الاسئله اللي فيها except دي اخد بالي منها، لانه هو بيمشي في اتجاه وبعدين except اللي بتيجي في الاخر دي تخليك تغير الكلام اللي هو قاله او ما بيعملش الكلام اللي اتقال قبل كده. مستر يحيى هنقول الانسر عندنا هتبقى
The right answer is letter A, which is estrogen, mister.
Estrogen hormone. طبعا estrogen hormone secreted from the gravium follicle inside the ovary and stimulate the regulation of the menstruation cycle in females and also increase the thickness of the endometrium and responsible for the appearance of the female secondary sexual characters. برضو كمان الاستروجين الناس بتسميه كمان استراديول هرمون. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لي FSH hormone means follicle stimulating hormone and LH or luteinizing hormone are secreted from dots. Gravium follicle, corpus luteum, endometrium. The last is the pituitary gland.
The adenohypophysis part, which is the frontal lobe of the pituitary gland, Mr.
Yes, the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, or the adenohypophysis, responsible for the secretion of the group of hormones as the FSH hormone and the LH hormone, which stimulates the ovaries and testes in the human being to secrete the hormones. السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لي the ilium bone is found in the dots، وبعدين بيقول لي thoracic cage، pelvic girdle، pectoral girdle، arm bones. هنقول له right answer مستر يحيى.
It's the appendicular system, which is the pelvic girdle, Mr., which is the lower part of the skeleton, the pelvic girdle.
Of course, because the pelvic girdle consists of two identical halves. Each half consists of ilium, ischium, and the pubis. The two pupae are connected at the ventral side at the pubic symphysis. So the ilium is the part of the pelvic girdle. The next question برضو بيقول لي choose. Nervous irritability arises from the deficiency of DOTS hormone. وبعدين بيقول لي باراثرمون وكالسيتونين هرمون، اوكسيتوسين هرمون، وبعد كده سايروكسين هرمون. مستر يحيى هنقول مين الهرمون اللي بيعمل nerve irritability during its deficiency؟
It's really the parathyroid hormone, Mr.
Of course, the parathyroid hormone, the deficiency of parathyroid hormone is called the hypoparathyroidism, which decreases the calcium level in blood, which leads to the painful muscle spasms and also the irritability, or the patient become more excitable. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لي all the following hormones affect bone growth except the DOTS bones: باراثرمون، كالسيتونين هرمون، جروث، وبعد كده بيقول لي سايروكسين هرمون. اخد بالي ان في except في السؤال، فهنقول له ايه مستر يحيى الانسر؟
The right answer is thyroxine hormone, Mr.
Thyroxine hormone, because the parathyroid and calcitonin hormone antagonize each other. Parathyroid increase the calcium level in blood, the calcitonin decrease the calcium level in blood, and the calcium with the phosphorus ions that affect the action of the growth hormone during the growth of the skeletal system. But the thyroxine hormone is not directly affect the bone growth. السؤال اللي بعده برضه بيقول لي painful muscle convolution and spasms are result of deficiency of DOTS hormone: insulin, parathyroid, calcitonin hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone. لما نتكلم عن المسل spasms مستر يحيى هو هنا ال deficiency of ايه يعمل muscle؟
It's the parathyroid hormone, Mr., because it is responsible for making the convulsions and the muscle spasms in the body.
Of course, because the parathyroid hormone during the deficiency of parathyroid hormone, which is called parathyroidism, hypoparathyroidism, that leads to decrease the calcium level in blood, and also parathyroid antagonize the action of the calcitonin hormone. The next question بيقول لي during heart attack the doctor may resort to inject the patient with the DOTS hormone. وبعدين بيقول لي this choice الحقيقه طبعا في ادرينالين، سايروكسين، انسولين، برولاكتين. المفروض ان انا اخد بالي السؤال اللي مش مباشر زي كده ادرس للتشويسز اللي هو مديهاني، هبدا استبعد التشويس. كل تشويس هنا ليه 25% انسر. طيب انا كده لما اشيل واحد يبقى انا قللت التشويس اللي عندي، شلت اتنين يبقى في 50% و50%، شلت كمان واحد يبقى انا كده وصلت للرايت انسر. هنبدا نسال مستر يحيى في الهارت اتاك the doctor inject the patient with a hormone.
The adrenaline hormone, Mr., because it increases the blood pressure, Mr.
Of course, the adrenaline hormone, which is the hormone of the critical situations that increase the contraction of the heart and also increase the pulsating of the blood vessels, so that stimulate the heart to act. يبقى هنا هنختار adrenaline hormone. عندنا بعد كده في أسئلة match question. match question ده سؤال سهل، هيعتمد على ان حضرتك عارف الانسر وبتختارها من الكولم مثلا بي. يبقى انا عندي كولم بي بيديني ستيتمنت، وبعدين انا ببدا اختار من الكولم اي وات سيوتس فور كولم بي. نبص مع بعض هنا كده. في الكولم اي كاتب لي اي ده هرمونز، الهرمونز ده كاتب لي اي دي اتش اور انتي ديوريتيك هرمون، وبعدين اي سي تي اتش اور ادرينوكورتيكوتروفيك هرمون، جي اتش جروث هرمون، نمبر 4 اف اس اتش هرمون اور فوليكل ستيميوليتنج هرمون، Number 5 LH hormone or luteinizing hormone. Number 6 thyroid stimulating hormone. حضرتك لما تيجي في الكولم بي هتشوف الافكت اوف ذا هرمون. لما يجي يقول له كنترول ميتابوليزم بروسيس سبيشالي بروتين، وممكن اضيف عليها اند ذا جروث اوف ذا سكيليتال سيستم، يبقى انا هختار مستر يحيى الهرمون اللي بنقول عليه جروث هرمون. يبقى الجروث هرمون ده stimulate the assimilation of the metabolism especially protein. لكن لما يقول لي stimulate the formation of the corpus luteum. Formation of corpus luteum.
It's LH, Mr.
Luteinizing hormone which stimulate the gravium follicle to release the mature ova and change into yellow body. The yellow body is called the corpus luteum. The LH hormone is secreted from the pituitary gland and affect the gravium follicle inside the ovary of the female. وبعد كده في number C بيقول لي causes the contraction of the blood vessels.
It's the ADH hormone which is responsible for increasing the blood pressure, Mr.
جميل.
Which is secreted from the neurohypophysis part of the pituitary gland, Mr.
جميل. احنا جبنا لحضراتكم الانسر كده، امشي معايا واحده واحده كده شوف الكلام ده مظبوط ولا لا علشان تبقى مركز اكتر. هنا الانتي ديوريتيك هرمون كان الانسر بتاعته causes contraction of the blood vessels. لما اجي اشوف ادرينوكورتيكوتروفيك هرمون مع نمبر دي stimulate cortex of adrenal gland to secrete its hormones. Growth hormone control the metabolism especially protein. Follicle stimulating hormone help the formation of sperms in the testes. بعد كده بيقول لي luteinizing hormone or LH hormone stimulate the formation of corpus luteum. Thyroid stimulating hormone which is also called thyrotrophin hormone that stimulate the thyroid gland to secrete its hormones. سؤال الماتش ده مش بالضروره يجي لك ماتش، ممكن يجي لك تشوز يعني اي واحده من دول، اي جمله من بي من الكولم بي هختار لها اي 4 من الكولم A وهتبقى ليها انسر واحده بس. فالسؤال ده لما تحله كأنك جاوبت مجموعة تشويس كتيرة. ممكن يبقى scientific term، يعني ممكن نجيب أي statement من الماتش بي من الكولم بي وده يبقى act as a scientific term، وحضرتك هتقول the hormone which stimulates the مثلا formation of corpus luteum، يبقى حضرتك هتقول لي the luteinizing hormone and so on. الفكرة إن احنا يبقى عندنا معلومة ويسألني عليها زي ما هو عايز، يسألني يقول لي تشوز، يقول لي رايت ساينتفك تيرم، يقول لي جيف ريزن، يقول لي اكسبلين، يقول لي وات هابن. طالما المعلومة عندي يبقى أكيد هعرف أجاوب السؤال صح. شوف السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لي إيه، برضو ماتش كويستشن، وبعدين بيقول لي the disease وبعدين the reason of the disease. هنا the diseases as a dwarfism وبعدين cretinism, simple goiter, ectophthalmic goiter, giantism, myxoedema, acromegaly, masculinization. وبعدين عشان هنختار من البي، انت ممكن اوتوماتيكلي كده لما اقول دوارفيزم تعرف ان ده deficiency of growth hormone، يبقى انا هدور على المعلومه اللي عندي، لو لقيتها يبقى انا صح. طب لو انا ما لقيتهاش يبقى في معلومه تانية خاصه بالديزيز دون هلاقيها برضو لازم تبقى موجوده في الكولم بي. احنا قلنا الديزيزز هنقول الانسر على طول مع بعضنا علشان نشوف الرايت انسر بتاعتها تبقى ازاي. فهنا بيقول لي دوارفيزم في نمبر سي هنا decrease the secretion as or due to the decreasing or deficiency of the secretion of growth hormone in childhood. The cretinism مع نمبر جي decrease the secretion or due to decreasing the secretion of thyroxine in children. ectophthalmic goiter مع نمبر E the hypersecretion of thyroxine اللي بنقول عليه hyperthyroidism. وبعدين the giantism مع F increase the secretion of growth hormone in children. myxoedema مع H decrease the secretion of thyroxine hormone in adults. acromegaly مع number A due to the increasing the secretion of growth hormone in adults. masculinization number B the unbalanced secretion of the adrenal cortex 6 hormones. الحقيقة احنا ممكن نقول لحضرتك what is the reason of each of the following diseases ونكتب الديزيسز بس وحضرتك هتقول لي الريزن بتاعها. ممكن اقول لك مثلا explain what would happen during وهتكلم على حاجة في نمبر بي، اقول لك مثلا deficiency of the growth hormone during children مثلا or childhood. يبقى في كل حالة من دول انا بعرف المعلومة كويس، وبعد كده اخد بالي الاجابة تبقى ايه. ممكن طالب شاطر يشوف الكولم A بس ويعمل عليه كولم B عادي، ممكن حد يبقى عنده كولم B ويعمل كولم A عادي. بشوف طلبة بتعمل أسئلة، بتخترع أسئلة، ودي بتبقى طلبة شاطرة قوي قوي، لأن السؤال بيبقى أولا شكله كويس وجديد، وبيقول إن الطالب ده فاهم بشكل مباشر. نشوف حضراتكم كده السؤال اللي بعده، ده بيقول لي define each of the following. أول حاجة هنا بيقول لي what's meant by each of the following، وبعدين بيقول لي centrum. Mr. Yahya, what's meant by centrum? What about the answer?
The centrum is the anterior part of the vertebra which is attached laterally to the two transverse processes of the vertebra and posteriorly to its neural canal.
Of course, that is a part of the vertebra. وطبعا part of the vertebra connected with the transverse process وبعدين posteriorly to the bony ring neural canal or the neural arc. السؤال اللي بعده طبعا دي شكل الفرتبرا، وكلنا لازم نعرف نرسم فيرتبرا، لازم اخد بالي من الجزء بتاع السنترم، ارسم بعد السنترم النيورال كانال، اخد بالي ان في سترونج اراوند بون اراوند ذا نيورال كانال بنقول عليها نيورال ارك، وبعدين برسم الترانسفيرس بروسيس، وبعد كده بعمل نيورال سباين، ومن الترانسفيرس بروسيس بعمل الجزئين بتاع الانتيريور اند بوستيريور ارتكيوليتنج بروسيس. السؤال اللي بعد كده برضو what's meant by the neural spine. Mr. Yahya, what's the neural spine?
It is the process which is directed downward for the vertebra.
Of course, it is the process of the vertebra that directed downwards. لما تجيب كده على ظهر أي أنيمال وتمشي إيدك كده، أو على ظهر حد ما يبقاش يعني تخين قوي، يبقى حد رفيع، هبص ألاقي كأن إيدي بتنزل كده تك 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 تك، هتبقى باينة قوي في بعض الريبتايلز مثلا زي الكروكودايل، بيبقى باينة قوي شكل النيورال سباين وهي كلها directed downwards. شوف السؤال اللي بعده. السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لي the ribs. What about the ribs, Mr. Yahya?
The ribs, really, they are curved bones which are attached to the sternum of the vertebra, and it's a transverse process, Mr.
Yes, the ribs are connected as a centrum and transverse process at the dorsal side, but the upper 10 pairs are connected as a ventral side with the sternum bone. Except طبعا the floating ribs. طبعا two lower pairs of ribs number 11 and 12 are free at the anterior side. شو السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا the acetipulum cavity. What about acetipulum cavity, Mr. Yahya?
When it comes to acetipulum cavity, it is the acetipulum. It is the cavity which attaches the ischium with the ilium in the pubis, that is responsible for the articulation of the pelvis with the femur bone.
Of course, the head of the femur fit in the acetipulum cavity to form the thigh joint or hip joint, which act as a kind of wide synovial joint. شو السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا the scapula. Mr. Yahya, what about the scapula?
The scapula, Mr. Really, it is a triangular bone which is found in the pectoral girdle, which has its outer end is pointed and its inner end is forward, Mr. And it is attached to the clavicle bone, which is thin bone, Mr.
Of course. So the scapula is a triangular bone, its inner end is broad and the outer end is pointed, and it has a process attached to the clavicle, which is the thin bone. خلينا فاكرين the scapula containing a cavity called the glenoid cavity, where the head of the humerus fit to form the shoulder joint. يبقى الشولدر joint ده the articulation between the head of the humerus bone with the glenoid cavity, which act as a part of the scapula bone. السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا the cartilage.
Cartilages, really, they are a kind of connective tissue that are composed of cells are called the cartilaginous cells. They are composed of cartilaginous cells which are responsible for decreasing the friction between bones to decrease the corrosion of the tips of the bones, Mr.
Of course, and also the cartilage don't have blood capillaries, so they get the food by diffusion from the neighboring bony tissue. السؤال اللي بعده برضو بيقول لنا the fibrous joints. What about fibrous joints, Mr. Yahya?
Fibrous joints, they are the joints that are formed due to the fusion between the bones because of the presence of the fibrous tissues at the ends of the bones, which are found inside the skull bones. They are responsible for connection of the bones which form the skull. They are fixed bones, Mr.
Of course. أفكر حضراتكم بس إن الفايبرس joints are unmovable joints because the presence of the fibrous tissue between the two neighboring bones and the fibrous tissue change into bones. So the two bones are fused with each other, so the joint can't move. So the fibrous joints, which are located in the part of the cranium or the cranium part of the skull, which serrated with each other, and that prevent the movement of the bones. So the fibrous joints are unmovable joints. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لي the cartilaginous joints, Mr. Yahya.
When it comes to cartilaginous joints, you could say that they are the joints that are responsible for attachment between the adjacent bones, the tips of the adjacent bones, like those who are found in the vertebral column, where they are responsible for making the movement of that vertebral column limited. It has limited movement for that vertebral column.
Of course, that's act as a very limited movement joint. So the presence of the cartilaginous disc between the vertebra of the vertebral column allow the movement or a little movement of the vertebra of the vertebral column, and also that protect the corrosion or the erosion due to the friction with the vertebra with each other during the movement of the vertebral column. So اللي بعده بيقول لنا the ligaments. What about ligaments, Mr. Yahya?
Ligaments, they are a type of connective tissue that are responsible for the connection or attachment between two different bones, like that which is found inside the cruciate ligament in the knee joint, Mr.
Of course, that's the ligaments which connect two bones with each other. The ligament connect the bones with each other, but the tendon connect the muscles with the bones. ده هيخلينا نفكرنا بالسؤال اللي بعده اللي بيسألنا what about the tendons?
Tendons, actually, Mr., it is a kind of a strong connective tissue that is responsible for attachment between two different things, which are, number one, the bones, number two, the muscles, like that, which are found inside in the gastrocnemius muscle, and the heel bone, which is called the Achilles tendon, Mr.
Of course, the Achilles tendon connect the gastrocnemius muscle with the heel bone, and that facilitate the contraction of the muscle and also allow the movement of the ankle part of the feet. السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا the sarcomere. Yes, Mr. Yahya, what about the sarcomere? What's the definition of sarcomere?
The sarcomere, really, it is the distance between two successive Z-lines, Mr.
Of course, the two successive Z-line in the myofibril. وقلنا من شوية إنها containing a piece or a dark band and a light band in two halves. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لنا the motor unit. Mr. Yahya.
It is the functional unit of the skeletal muscle, Mr. It is the unit from which the skeletal muscle is consisted of.
Yes, and the contraction of the muscle is the sum of the contraction of all its motor units. السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا the neurotransmitters as acetylcholine and noradrenaline. What about the neurotransmitters, its site and function, Mr. Yahya?
Neurotransmitters. When it comes to neurotransmitters, Mr., you're talking about one of the most important substances responsible for transportation of the nerve impulses between the nerve and the muscle, because it is responsible for this substance is found inside a cavity is called the vesicle. It is decomposed into two different things, which is acetate and choline, and it is responsible for the contraction of the muscle, Mr.
Yes, that due to the action of the cholinesterase enzyme if the acetylcholine perform its function. We remember that when the acetylcholine or the vesicle which contain the acetylcholine in the synapse reaches the synaptic cleft at a certain part which is called the receptor, the calcium pump push calcium ions on the vesicle to discharge its contents to allow the acetylcholine to pass through the cleft and get on the muscle plate. The muscle plate change its state from polarization into depolarization, which leads to the muscle contraction. After the contraction of the muscle, the action of the cholinesterase enzyme act. The cholinesterase enzyme hydrolyzes acetylcholine into choline and acetate after performing its function, so the state of the muscle plate change from depolarization into repolarization, which allow the muscle to relax again. السؤال اللي بعدين كان بيقول لنا
without having duct. They do not have duct like that which are found inside the pituitary gland, thymus gland, and thyroid gland, Mr.
Okay, many glands in the endocrine gland system, they are called the endocrine gland, which is supplied with a huge number of blood capillaries because they secrete the hormones inside the gland, so they are called endocrine glands in the blood directly. أبنائي وبناتي طلاب الثانوية العامة هنطلع فاصل قصير كده نريح حضراتكم شوية وبعد كده نرجع مع بعض مرة تانية. اتفضل. خليها جنبك معاك قلم. كل سؤال انت تحس ان هو لذيذ او غريب او حضرتك مش عارفه اكتبه، وبعد كده هتلاقي ان حضرتك على اخر السنة بقى عندك شوية اسئلة كتيرة انت تقدر تراجعها في وقت قليل قوي، ودي اللي بتعمل عندك الاكسبيرينس العالي بتاع المادة بتاعتنا، وطبعا بترفع المستوى بشكل مباشر قوي. هنرجع مع بعضنا مع سؤال what are the properties of hormones. Mr. يحيى, what about the hormones?
The hormones, actually, Mr., it is a chemical substance which is synthesized and secreted by the endocrine gland, transported by the blood to reach to the organ where it affects the function and the properties of the organ that it reaches to.
Of course, and the hormones may be protein, amino acids, or steroids. The hormones may affect one or more than one of the body organs, and they secreted in a purified state. هنشوف مع حضراتكم السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا ايه. سؤالي بيسألني what do you mean or what's meant by the infundibulum. Mr. Yahya, what about the infundibulum?
Infundibulum, Mr., it is considered as part of the hypophysis part, which is apart from the pituitary gland. It is responsible for connection between the brain and the pituitary gland, and is responsible for connection between the brain and the pituitary gland to transport the hormones which are secreted from the neural cells which are found in the hypothalamus to reach to the neural part of the pituitary gland to be secreted in the blood.
Of course, طبعا احنا قلنا لحضراتكم ان كانت عندنا ال pituitary gland consists of two main parts, the adenohypophysis and the neurohypophysis. قلنا لحضراتكم the neurohypophysis consists of the posterior lobe and the infundibulum. Infundibulum is a structure as a funnel shape that connect between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland and responsible for the transmission of the hormones which secrete from the hypothalamus as the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin hormone which is secreted from a certain cells in the hypothalamus and pass through the infundibulum to the posterior lobe of pituitary gland. شوف السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لنا comparisons. طبعا هنعمل compare between each of the following، وبعدين بيقول لي shoulder girdle and pelvic girdle. الحقيقة الكومباريزون كبيرة فعلشان الكومباريزون كبيرة هنخليها قدام حضراتكم كده ونشوف البوينتس اوف كومباريزون. طبعا ممكن في الامتحان يديك البوينتس اوف كومباريزون لما تبقى كومباريزون كبيرة، وممكن ما يديش لحضرتك البوينت اوف كومباريزون لو هي كومباريزون صغير. هنا لما اجي الشولدر جيردل وبلفيك جيردل، the type of skeleton is the appendicular skeleton, both of them appendicular skeleton. الحقيقة يعني احنا غالبا لما يبقى في comparison ما بنجيبش السيميلاريتيز بين الحاجات اللي بنعمل compare بينها، لكن احنا بس بنفكر حضرتك ان ده act as a part of the appendicular skeleton. اوكي. النقطة التانية بيقول لي the function of the shoulder girdle, it attach the forelimbs with the axial skeleton، لكن هنا attach the hind limbs with the axial skeleton. The number of bones in the shoulder girdle 4 bones, but 6 bones in the pelvic girdle. The bones of the shoulder girdle is which consists of 2 identical halves. Each half consists of 2 bones, scapula and clavicle, but the pelvic girdle, ilium, ischium, and pubis. The shape of bones in scapula is a triangular bone, and the inner broad end and the pointed outer end. The clavicle bone is the thin bone attached to the pointed end of the scapula. لكن لما نيجي للبونز of or the shape of bones in the pelvic girdle, the ilium, dorsal bone, the ischium, the ventral bone, the pubis connect between them. لما اجي حضراتكم اشوف الكافيتس اللي موجوده هنلاقي ان الكافيتي of the shoulder girdle is a glenoid cavity where the head of the humerus fit to form shoulder joint, but the stipulum cavity is the cavity between ilium and ischium where the head of the femur fit to form hip joint or thigh joint. الحقيقة ممكن الكومباريزون نعملها بشكل كبير، فيها نقط كبيرة كتيرة زي اللي حضرتك شفتها، لكن احنا كمان ممكن اننا نقولها في 3 نقط بس وهي في 3 نقط لازم ما نقص من الانفورميشن اللي هو محتاجها في الإجابة. لكن احنا مش بنعد النقط اللي انت عملت الكومباريزون في كام نقطة، لكن بنقول ان المعلومات بتاعة الكومباريزون هنا مظبوطة ولا لا. يعني لو حضرتك عملت الكومباريزون بنقط اقل من كده، قلت الاستراكشر والفانكشن بتاع كل جزء، خلاص انت كده عملت الكومباريزون. برضو نشوف الكومباريزون اللي بعدها. دايما سؤال الكومباريزون بيجمع لي معلومات كتير. هنا بيقول لي ماكس اوديما اند ذا اكروميجالي. لما يبقى في ديزيسز بالشكل ده هتبقى البوينت اوف كومباريزون due to the reason of the disease and also the symptoms of the disease. Mr. Yahya, what about the symptoms of myxedema?
Myxedema, it is the disease which is caused by the first hyposecretion during the adult stage, okay?
Of thyroxine hormone.
So it is called hypothyroidism.
Yes.
So the characters of that disease is number 1, loss of hair, skin. The skin is not fine. And also their body decrease in the mental and physical activities. You're talking about myxedema, Mr. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, and also decrease of the rates of the heartbeats. The heartbeat decrease in the metabolic rates of the body, and also gain weight because the metabolic rate is different, so that weight gain. But concerning to acromegaly,
yes.
Acromegaly, it is caused by the hypersecretion of the growth hormone, but during the adult stage, okay?
Puberty, yes.
Yes, that's it. But its characters or symptoms, it means that the jaws and the face bones become bigger, okay? And the extremities of the body, like the hand, the toes, the fingers, become bigger. So these were the characters or symptoms of the acromegaly, Mr.
Of course. So the acromegaly is a disease that formed as a result of the hypersecretion of growth hormone after puberty, that not leads to increase the growth of the skeletal system, but increase the length of the extreming bones at the hands, the feet, the lower jaw, the cheekbones, that leads to deformation of the body bones. So the disease is called the acromegaly. السؤال اللي بعده برضو بيقول لي compare between each of the following. لا احنا غيرنا الحقيقة، خلينا give reason for each of the following. أول give reason بيقابلنا بيقول لنا the occurrence of giantism in some children. اتفضل يا مستر يحيى، هو الجيانتزم يبقى in some children ولا in adults due to increase the growth hormone from the childhood?
Gigantism.
Yes.
Gigantism means the increase of the growth hormone, but during the stage which is called the adult stage, Mr. Okay.
Yes.
So it means the increase of the growth hormone during the adult stage, Mr.
Yes, from the children, the pituitary gland secrete great amount of growth hormone. The presence of high concentration of growth hormone in the blood from the childhood that leads to the increasing the length of the skeletal system, which is called the giantism. يبقى هنا الانسر بتاعنا كده نبص عليها، هنا بيقول لك because the hypersecretion or because of the hypersecretion of the growth hormone or GH during the child period or childhood or from the childhood. السؤال اللي بعده برضه بيقول لي give reason for each of the following. The presence of girdles in the skeleton of the animals or of the human being is the same.
The same.
Yes, Mr. Yahya, that means the question asks about the function or the importance of the girdles of the skeletal system.
Yes, Mr. Really, they are responsible for attachment for the forelimbs and the lower limbs to the vertebral column. That means that it enables them from the movement. So they are responsible for attachment for lower limbs and the upper limbs for the skeleton. Or the vertebral column, which is the central skeleton part of the body.
Of course, that facilitates the movement of the forelimbs and the hind limbs. That facilitates the movement of the forelimbs to catch and carry the objects, and also facilitates the movement and the connection of the hind limbs with the vertebral column. السؤال اللي بعد كده برضو بيقول لي give reason for each of the following. السؤال بيقول لنا the upper part of the ulna has a depression. Why the upper part of the ulna has a depression, Mr. Yahya?
Really, Mr. This part is composed of two different parts. With the higher part is called the radius.
Yes.
Okay, and the lower part is called the ulna. And the higher part is called the radius, and the lower part is called the ulna. The higher part is shorter, slightly shorter than that of the lower part. This part, which is called the ulna, it has a depression, something like cavity. Okay. But the humerus part, this is called the humerus part. The humerus, it has something like, projection. It fits inside the depression, which is found inside the ulna, to help in articulation of the two bones, Mr.
Of course, that leads to the formation of the elbow joint.
Yes.
So the elbow joint is formed at the connection between the lower part of the humerus with the depression of the ulna, and also the elbow joint act as a limited synovial joint. هنشوف مع بعضنا برضو سؤال كمان. احنا بنحاول نجيب اسئله كتير عشان نغطي جزء كبير من شابتر 1 و 2 عشان نبقى عملنا عليه ريفيجن جيد ان شاء الله. السؤال اللي معانا دلوقتي بيقول لك the knee joint is considered one of the limited movement joint. ليه الني جوينت limited؟ وممكن نغير السؤال شويه ونقول ان الني جوينت act as a limited synovial joint. هنخلي بالنا لما اقول لك هو limited ليه دي ليها اجابه، لكن لما اقول لك ان هو limited synovial ليه يبقى هتقول لي limited ليه وهتقول لي synovial ليه. هنسمع الاجابه من مستر يحيى، اتفضل.
When it comes to limited, Mr., you're talking about the knee joint as limited joint. This is because it moves just only in one direction, okay?
Yes.
It doesn't move in all the directions like that which is found in the shoulder or the hip joints.
Yes.
But it is limited because it moves in only one direction. But when it comes to the reason of why it is called the synovial, because
yes.
it has something like jelly, is called the synovial fluid, which contains some fluids which are responsible for preventing the friction between the bones to prevent the corrosion between the two bones, the ends or the adjacent bones of the joints.
Of course, and also the synovial joint facilitates the movement of the bones with each other and decrease its friction during the movement of the joint. السؤال اللي بعد كده برضو give reason question بيقول لنا سؤال بيقول لنا the occurrence of the muscle fatigue sometimes. the occurrence of muscle fatigue sometimes. وهتلاقي في الكتاب بتاع المدرسة في أسئلة بتقول لك give reason muscle fatigue وبس، وكأن السؤال بيقول لك what about the reasons that leads to the muscle fatigue. اتفضل مستر يحيى.
Really, mister, when oxygen is not enough for respiration, because I do some extra vital activities or physical activities, this means that I need more and more oxygen, okay? My body need more and more oxygen, but there is not enough oxygen which reach to the glucose inside the cells to make that cellular respiration. This means that there is a type of cellular respiration that takes inside the cell which is called anaerobic cellular respiration, which produces just only 2 ATP, like we have been studying in the 2 secondary state or 11 grades. But in this case, the presence or the production of the lactic acid, which is accumulated inside the muscles, which cause that fatigue for the body because of the contraction of the muscle more and more times. Rapid contraction of the muscles.
Yes, so during the vigorous exercise, the muscle respire normally aerobically or at the presence of oxygen to produce great amount of ATP. But during the deficiency of oxygen or the shortage of oxygen, the muscle respire anaerobically and also besides the aerobic respiration. But the anaerobic respiration leads to reduce the pyruvic acid into lactic acid, because the pyruvic acid act as a harmful substance inside the muscle. So the pyruvic acid reduced into lactic acid, and the lactic acid leads to the muscle fatigue. But at the presence of sufficient amount of oxygen, oxidation takes place of the lactic acid and they change into pyruvic acid also, which get inside the Krebs cycle to produce amount of energy in the form of ATP. السؤال اللي بعد كده عندنا برضو بيقول لي give reason although cartilage don't contain blood vessels, they get food and oxygen. Mr. Yahya, how the cartilage can get its food and the oxygen although they don't supply it with the blood capillaries?
By diffusion, mister, because they do not have vessels to transport whatever, to transport oxygen gas, carbon dioxide, water, or everything. So or anything. So they have a process which is called they could do something is a process which is called diffusion. Diffusion means that transportation of the ions or the chemicals from the high concentrated medium to the lower concentrated one, from the blood to that part.
Yes, so the passage or the oxygen and the food can move from high concentrated medium, which is the bony tissue, to low concentrated medium, which is cartilaginous tissue, that takes place by diffusion. Also the exchange of gases, the presence of carbon dioxide in the cartilaginous cells, which act as the living cells, can transfer to the neighboring tissue by diffusion. فكر حضراتكم ان اخدنا قبل كده diffusion is the movement of molecules or ions from high concentrated medium to low concentrated medium due to the continuous free motion of molecules. هنشوف مع حضراتكم كده السؤال اللي بعده برضو بيقول لي give reason. بيقول لي some joints containing a synovial fluid. That means the question asks about what the function of the synovial fluid.
Actually, mister, the synovial fluid has a fluid which is responsible for preventing the friction between the bones, the two adjacent bones, that prevent the friction and the corrosion between the bones. So that synovial joints are responsible for the movement and also responsible for protection of the corrosion between the bones of the joints.
Of course, and that facilitates the movement of the bones with each other at the joint. السؤال اللي بعده برضه بيقول لي give reasons the cell wall is thickened by cellulose and lignin. ممكن نخلي السؤال the presence of lignified cellulose in some walls. The question asks a certain structural support, which is the deposition of cellulose and lignin. Mr. Yahya, what about the answer of the question?
Just to increase the support of the plant, to be supported more and more, because whenever cellulose and lignin are deposited in the cell walls, they increase or acquire their hardness. They increase the hardness of the cell wall.
Of course, because the deposition of cellulose and the lignin that act as a structural support, which supports the plant part, so the plant become more hard, more flexible, and they can tolerate the removing of the plant or the binding of the plant by the environmental conditions as the wind, for example. السؤال اللي بعديه برضه give reason بيقول لك the bone of the posterior part of the skull form a cavity or the presence of the big hole or the large hole as a dorsal side of the skull. Mr. Yahya, what about the big hole of the skull?
Actually, Mr. The posterior part of the skull contains a hole, which is a big hole. It is called medically foramen magnum, okay? Yes. Which is responsible for the attachment between the two main parts of the nervous system, which are the brain and the spinal cord. So it's responsible for the attachment between the brain and the spinal cord to transfer the nerve messages in between.
Yes, or through which the spinal cord is connected with the brain. Yes. So they act as a central nervous system of the human beings or the animals. So اللي بعده برضه بيقول لنا give reason وبيقول لي the wilting of leaves and stems of herbaceous plants that face drought and attaining their turgidity by the soil irrigation. The question asked about the physiological support of the plant, Mr. Yahya. So what about the answer?
Actually, Mr. Concerning to physiological support, you know that whenever you are talking about the physiological support, you are talking about the cell as whole.
Yes.
Because whenever the cell gains water, this means that the water passes from outside to inside the cell, and this increase the volume of the vacuole, which is the sap vacuole, which acquires and increase the support and the volume of the cell. This means that it will be supported. Whenever it loses water, this means that its volume will be decreased. So it will not be supported. So the physiological support means that the increase of the cell volume because of the absorption of water by osmosis, Mr.
Of course. The next question طبعا احنا بنحاول نغطي اسئله كتيره الحقيقه عشان الوقت بيجري مننا وقربنا ان تخلص الحلقه. فالسؤال اللي معانا دلوقتي بيقول لي most vertebrae have a bony rings. The question asks about the presence of bony rings in some of the vertebra in the vertebral column. Mr. Yahya, what about the answer?
The bony ring is really responsible for the protection of a very important part of the nervous system, which is called the spinal cord, Mr.
Yes, so the neural arc protects the spinal cord, which pass through the neural canal in the vertebral column. The neural arc is a very strong bone around the neural canal, or to protect protect the spinal cord, which pass through the neural canal. السؤال اللي بعد كده برضو عندي بيقول لي give reason the pituitary gland is known as the master gland. ده سؤال سهل كل الناس تعرف إجابته. اتفضل يا مستر يحيى.
Really, Mr. When it comes to the pituitary gland, you are talking about one of the most important glands found inside your body because it is called the master gland. Okay?
Yes.
So it is responsible for the secretion of two things. The tropheins, which are called the helpers, that is like the helpers of the pituitary gland, tropheins, which are stimulators for the other glands. The tropheins is like ADH, STH, is like FSH, LH, and those hormones are called the tropheins, which are responsible for activating and stimulating the other glands. But concerning to the gland itself, it is responsible for secretion of some hormones like the growth hormone, which affects the activities of the body.
Of course, so the pituitary gland secretes hormones to stimulate the other endocrine glands to secrete the hormones. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لي the twinning of the tendril of the climbing plants around the support, or why the tendril twin around the support, Mr. Yahya?
Actually, Mr. The tendril move around the support. Okay, but when it comes to auxins are called the hormonal plant or plant hormones. They are responsible for the growth of plant. Okay, so The hormones, which are called the auxins in this case, are responsible for the elongation of the tendril which are twinning around the support. This is the support, okay, the support, and this is the tendril. The auxins, which are secreted by the tips of the growing parts of the plant and also the buds, they are responsible for the elongation of the part away from the support. This is the support, and this is the part away from the support of the tendril. So whenever the auxins are produced, they are responsible for the elongation of this part, which is responsible for twinning the support, which is responsible for twinning the tendril around the support.
So the high concentration of the auxin increase the growth of the tendril as a side away from the support, so that allows the tendril to twin around the support, that decrease its length and pulls the plant to grow vertically beside the support. أبنائنا وبناتنا طلاب وطالبات الثانوية العامة، دي كان نهاية الوقت بتاعت الحلقة بتاعتنا النهاردة. اسمحوا لي أشكر مستر يحيى على وجوده معانا.
You are welcome, Mr.
ميرسي ليك مستر يحيى. احنا بشكر حضراتكم، ان شاء الله نلتقي الثلاث الجاي في نفس الميعاد ان شاء الله. شكرا والى اللقاء.